For centuries, men and women have stepped away from the table to fast, to pray, to seek something deeper. But what does a 40-day fast look like today? I'm Dr. Sam McKean of Fasting, and in this podcast, I invite you to walk with four ordinary people on an extraordinary journey.
Day 17. Day 17 was some interesting challenges and revelations for me personally. Davey, for his day 16 and day 17, he had a fever of 101 and he needed to add some electrolytes to his drink. As I mentioned yesterday, Chelsea was just kind of wanting to eat food just for the simple joy of eating. We are in a food-centric culture. And I kind of fell into that trap a little bit. And I used fasting fuels as a cheat. So we were hanging out with some friends and I decided to have some fasting fuels. I was going to eat some cucumbers or black olives. I didn't need it. I just ate to be social and because we're a food centric culture. And so I just ate things that weren't going to break my fast, even though I didn't need them. And I had brought with me my chicken stock and Texas Pete drink. And while I was eating these foods just to be social, and not break my fast and not really let anybody know I was fasting, I felt really convicted to just stop doing that. And I actually just to only drink water after that. And I went and actually poured out my new favorite fasting fuel, Texas Pete and chicken stock, and decided I should only drink water after that. And I just really was really convicted of that. And part of the reason I was convicted is because fasting just is an excuse to have a fasting fuel because you can. And this is when I started to become aware of my problem with gluttony. And I was making excuses even when I fast. This is something I would end up praying about for the rest of my fast. This is something that I had to deal with even after my fast. And I had to learn a lot of things. But this is when it really kind of started to be convicting of me. This is when I started to kind of realize what I call the long faster's dilemma. And that a lot of people who can fast a very long time is easy for our body. Then we tend to fast and feast and we don't really feed. And I mentioned that before, but what I find that I had a problem with, and especially people that can do longer fast, we do really good on our first meal because we've been really dedicated to fast. And our first meal, we break our fast. We can listen to our body. We can stop eating as soon as we're full. But within a few hours of breaking that first fast, we start to go into this grazing phase where we just constantly are eating a little bit because we can and because we feel like we deserve it and because there's room in our stomach after we fast and we missed food for so long. And so there's all these justifications and it's very easy to overdo it and just constantly eat after you've been fasting for a very long period of time. And that is the gluttony that a lot of us struggle with. So this one, I want to talk about two verses or two sections in the Bible, Proverbs 23, 19 through 21, and James 5, 5. And then I want to talk about some research of why this can actually happen for people who fast. So Proverbs 23, 19 is listen, my son, and be wise and guide your heart on the right course. Do not join those who drink too much wine or gorge themselves on too much meat, for the drunkard and the glutton will come to poverty. Okay? So obviously that's not good. And then James 5, 5, this is where it really kind of really hit me, is you have lived a life, you've lived on this earth in luxury and in self-indulgence. You have fattened your hearts in the day of slaughter. It kind of really hits really hard because you're supposed to guide your heart on the right course. And being gluttonous is not the right course. And it's really easy. And on this earth, especially in America, we have an abundance we have food available to us all the time. And we live a life of luxury and self-indulgence that most of the world never gets to experience. No matter what your income level is, you have food available to you at all times. And so most of the world still lives on less than $1 a day. And if you go visit them in their country, these foreign countries, you spend 5 times their annual salary just to get on the plane and get there. Like, you can't tell them you're not rich. In Uganda, in 1 year in America making minimum wage, you will make more than a Ugandan will in their entire life. So we live in a luxurious and self-indulgence lifestyle, in a food-centric lifestyle. And we, even as Christians, are fattening ourselves for the day of slaughter. That is very convicting. And so this was really eye-opening for me. And I had to, the next day, I really felt I did no water. I did take any multivitamins. I did nothing other than just water because I felt like I was not really trusting in God in my fast at this point. I was doing the wrong type of fasting. I was doing it for, even though I didn't want people to know. And I was doing things that I didn't even need for myself as a show, which is just like, well, I'm just going to I'll have some fasting fuels that I don't even need just so, I can just play the part. And that was wrong. And it was very convicting. You get very convicted during these longer fasts. You get a lot of things are revealed to you. And that was something that was revealed to me. And this was just kind of the start of me dealing with gluttony and some other things that would get revealed to me too. And I'll talk about what happened with me and gluttony and that sin that I've had to deal with. And to be honest with you, it's been a successful sin in my life that I have to continue to be mindful of. So there are things that you have to be aware of, and you're going to get revealed to you that are sometimes, you know, you realize you're being self-indulgent. You realize you're being gluttonous, and it may not be gluttonous with food. What are your luxuries or the acts that you're doing to put on a show for other people? And God will convict you of those things because those are not the things that he wants in your life, and he wants more relationship with you. And he doesn't want you to do superficial actions. So the research on this is kind of interesting. It's actually came out most recently in 2024 because we're not supposed to be thinking about food. And here's the title of this research paper. It says, "Try not to think about food: an association between fasting, binge eating, and food cravings." Let me say that. Association between fasting, binge eating, and food cravings. And here's what they found. Those that can do longer fast binge eat more. So it's easy for us, and we tend to binge, and I think it's because we justify. And in this stage in our fasts, a lot of us are thinking about food. One thing that I like to watch food videos. They're fascinating to me. And even though I wasn't hungry, I like to watch it. So I already planned for how I was going to break my fast. And I'm not saying those things were wrong, but we constantly were thinking about food. And one of the things that I realized that I had to stop doing sometime in this fast, and it might have been, I can't remember, it was day 17, and it might come up later. I like to watch competitive eating. And that is literally like my sin that I struggle with. I watched people commit gluttony, and that's my sin. I watched my sin. I enjoyed watching my sin. So I'm not saying you can't watch competitive eaters. I'm not saying you can't do that, but be careful of what you are indulging in. And if I couldn't self-indulge with food and fasting, I was watching somebody else do it. I was watching somebody else commit my sin, or I would see it as my sin. So I was still finding a way to feed that sin, even though I wasn't feeding. So what you need to be aware of, if you have these tendencies, you need to be aware of that when you break your fast, you need to not go back to those things, and know that because it's easier for you to fast, it's also easier for you to hyperfixate on food, justify eating more food, and to binge eat. Now, they find when people fast, they tend not to, in that first 24 hours, you really can't, especially in the long fast. But if you do a all-day fast, you fast for all day, and you eat the next day, they find that people do can to overeat the next day, but there usually is a caloric deficit over the 48-hour period. So you get that, especially if a 40-day fast, you're not going to put all that weight back on right away. But eventually, if you go right back to that same old habit, then you will. Something to be aware of, mindful. Trust me, I know. Something I've had to struggle with. It is easy over time to put that weight back on, and that's not why you did it. So one of the things I taught about was you're supposed to feel like a lion for the tribe of Judah. Lions eat every 3 days, and they look for prey. But prey grazes and eats all the time. And cows, head down, eating grass, they are fattened up. They eat all the time, and they're raised for slaughter. You're fattening your heart for the day of slaughter. You can pray and repent for those sins, and you can ask for guidance to help you not fall back into that same pattern. Because it says that Satan is like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. And you don't want him to see you as prey. Because the most dangerous thing to a lion is another lion. And that's what you want him to see you as. This day is a day of just personal self-reflection that I've had to continue. And it's good for me to go back through this and recognize that there is issues, concerns, struggles that I thought I've dealt with, and sometimes they can come back. And so to go back to fasting and recognize that I need to make sure I don't go back to that same pattern and don't seek that out. That's the end of day 17. Happy fasting. See you tomorrow on day 18.